Well, let's get everything started. So welcome to the Crested Butte Museum Virtual Learning Series with Dwayne Vandenbush. It's on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. as you all know. All episodes will be on our YouTube channel, the Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum. So go ahead and put that in your Google or your search if you're looking for it. And you can watch and share those videos at any time. So please enjoy. This program is made possible by our two main sponsors, the Gunnison Trails and Hartman Castle Preservation Fund. It's also made possible from wonderful people that have been making donations, which include several of you in our webinar chat group right there. So thank you for supporting us, the museum, and this program, and future programs that we are putting together. We enjoy putting these different opportunities for people to learn and kind of embrace our community and our history. So be it virtual, in person, we try to do a little bit for everyone in all age groups. If you want more information, our website is crestedbuttemuseum.com, or stop by, visit us here at the museum. We're open daily from 11 to 5 p.m. We have a pop-up again with Mount Crested Butte celebrating their 50th. And that one is going to take place on February 12th, which is next Monday, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Elevation Hotel. We're going to be talking about milestones. There'll be a panel discussion looking back at the incorporation and major milestones of Mount Crested Butte. So go ahead and you can join us up there because we're going to have a pop-up again, and they've been really successful and quite fun to put together. We're going to feature basically things from 1973 to present day. So we'll have some artifacts, some photographs, some stories that you can go ahead and look at while the presentation has taken place, or after or before, I should say. So come on up. You need to register. Again, they're expecting over 250 people. So if you're sick, don't come. But go ahead and get registered. You can visit our webpage, has that information, or you can Google Mount Crested Butte, and you can find more information on their history talk. We have the pub crawl that Dwayne was talking about, and that's going to take place on Monday, February 26th at 6 o'clock, a little bit later, so you can go out and get some fun skiing in. And that's $35 for our members and $40 for our non-members. And our fun theme for that one, we decided, was to feature some of our fantastic artists, or authors, I should say, in the Crested Butte Gunnison Valley. Polly O'Brosseler will be speaking about her book, George Sibley about his books, and Dwayne Vandenbush. So we'll be at Bones, Daily Dose, and the Eldo. So tickets, once again, on our webpage, or stop in, visit us here at the museum. We'll get you sorted so you can come out and enjoy. That is all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne.
Yeah, thanks, Melinda. I think I'm going to start with Melinda with the first photo that we have.
Oh gosh, we're jumping right in.
Yeah, we're jumping right into photo number one. And while we're getting photo number one, next week's topic is going to be kind of interesting. We're going to talk about three towns: Gunnison, Lake City, and Monarch. Three towns that sometimes are not talked about. We always talk about the silver towns and Crested Butte, but it's going to be a good show next week. Also, we've got a trivia question at the end of the presentation today, and this time I got three questions that we're going to have to answer.
Wait. So let's go over these questions to make sure. These three questions, so we'll have three winners?
No, just you got to answer three questions and one winner.
So, okay, everybody.
So
keep that in mind.
Okay, here we go, everybody. We're going to talk about the Black Canyon today, and there's a great shot of the canyon from above, and I want everybody to take a look at Vernal Mesa down below. We're going to talk about that a lot later on. Now, on the north rim, you can see the Black Mesa Road, and on the south rim, you can see another road. You can't quite see the highway on the south, but you can see how narrow that gorge is. So the Black Canyon in the Gunnison country runs from Saponaro, 26 miles west of Gunnison, all the way to Pleasure Park and Lazier, not too far from Delta, and that's where the Gunnison River and the North Fork of the Gunnison River meet. The canyon runs for 55 miles, and the walls are 500 feet high at Saponaro and 2,700 feet high right in the midst of the gorge. The Gunnison River, which runs through the canyon, drops an average of 43 feet per mile. That is 6 times more than the Colorado River as it goes through the Grand Canyon. It is the steepest falling river in the United States, outside of the Yellowstone, which has 3 big waterfalls to bail it out. In one sensational section of the canyon, the Gunnison River drops 268 feet in 1 mile with no waterfalls. And we'll go to the next photo now. There is a famous photo of the painted wall. Now those are dikes in the painted wall, granite in the painted wall. And again, you can see the Gunnison River in the middle, and you can just see how steep and how narrow that canyon is. The Black Canyon has been carved out by erosion on the Gunnison River over millions of years, and it's separated from the Uncompahgre Valley to the west by Vernal Mesa. The canyon is called Black because of its depth, its dark and vertical walls and shadows, plus in certain parts, the sun shines only 33 minutes a day, only when it's right above the canyon at high noon. The Black Canyon initially was called the Grand Canyon of the Gunnison by early travelers. Some canyons of the West are longer. One, Hell's Canyon, is deeper, but none combine the depth, the narrowness, and the dread of the Black Canyon. The Indians had trails down part way into the canyon, but they said much rocks and big water kept them out. John Gunnison, in his railroad survey of 1853, declared, we're quoting, "That great canyon we have spent so many days traveling around." Gunnison's report also said that the Uncompahgre Valley just to the west was a desert and uninhabitable for settlement. Now, that's the area where they've got Montrose and Delta and Ridgeway today. Albert Peel of the Hayden Survey in 1874 referred to the Black Canyon as the Grand Canyon and said, and I quote, "It is inaccessible, and I am therefore obliged to pass by it with merely this reference." The Ute Indians were moved from the Los Pinos Indian Reservation near Cochetope Pass in the Gunnison country to Kelowna, 12 miles on the Uncompahgre River south of Montrose in 1875. And they were moved out because big mining rushes were beginning to take place in the San Juan and in the Gunnison country. Fort Crawford was established to keep tabs on the Utes 4 miles away along the river. When soldiers there irrigated the land, they found that crops were fantastic. The Ute Indians were moved out of the valley and onto the Uinta Indian Reservation in Utah in 1881. And that led to a whole bunch of homesteaders flocking into the Uncompahgre Valley. There was plenty of water, the land was rich, and the climate mild. More and more people came to the Uncompahgre Valley the following year in 1882 when the Denver and Rio Grande arrived. There were 175,000 irrigable acres in the valley, and 100,000 were taken up by farmers and ranchers. And the feeling was initially that the Uncompahgre River could irrigate all of the land. However, as time went on, farmers and ranchers soon found out that there was only enough water to irrigate 35,000 acres, and many foreclosures came, and many began to leave the Uncompahgre Valley. In the Black Canyon that same year of 1881, William Jackson Palmer of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad laid tracks along the Gunnison River in the Black Canyon from its start at Saponaro downriver 15 miles to Cimarron. Palmer, when he got to Cimarron, then sent his top surveyor, Byron Bryant, into the deepest part of the canyon below Cimarron to see if he could run his railroad through that part. Now, before we go, there is the Bryant surveying in 1882 in the Gunnison Gorge to see if you could run a railroad through there. And I guess you get a good idea that that might be impossible. So we'll hit the next one. And there's another shot, and that's actually from a scope around 1882. And there they are along the Gunnison River in the Black Canyon, trying to figure out if you can run a railroad through. Bryant and a 20-man crew went into the canyon in December of 82, thinking that it would take 20 days to cover the remaining 38 miles. Every day it took 2.5 hours to go down into the canyon, 2 in the bottom surveying, and then 3.5 hours to come out. There was nowhere they could really stay in the bottom of the canyon from day to day. They used ropes, and the climbing was tough and dangerous. Every man in Bryant's crew quit after a few days because of the danger. It took 68 days to go the 38 miles through the Gunnison Gorge from Cimarron, And when Bryant finished his survey and filed his report, it started out with the word impossible. Now, Melinda's going to show about 4 or 5 pictures here. Now, when I get finished, this is the Rio Grande coming through the Black Canyon, and that bridge goes from one side of the Gunnison River to the other along Crystal Creek. Next, there is a wreck near Crystal Creek in the canyon. Now, it's unusual to have a wreck at that time of the year. They had a lot of them during the winter and during the spring when the avalanches vomited down from the canyon walls. We'll take a look at the next one. There is a great shot of Chipeta Falls, which falls about 200 feet right into the Gunnison River, and you can see the Denver-Rio Grande Railroad tracks on the left. And we'll go to the next one. Now, there is a shot of the start of the canyon. That's not too far from Saponaro, where the walls are about 500 feet high, and that is about where you start entering the canyon from the west. And the next one. And there's a great shot of the Cure Canyon Needle, about 350 feet high, right across from Chipeta Falls. And that is where they had a section house, a Denver and Rio Grande section house in the canyon. The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad had to come out of the canyon at Cimarron. There's no way that they could go through the Gunnison Gorge. Byron Bryant's survey showed that. And now they came out and they had to go over Cerro Summit, arriving in Montrose in 1882. The Gunnison River in the Black Canyon is separated from the Uncompahgre Valley by high vernal mesa. We pointed that out right off at the start. And many in the valley look longingly at the water that might be available if you can get it there via a tunnel under the mesa. That, however, appeared to be a pipe dream and appeared to be no way. In 1894, a miner named Frank Lazan ran transit levels from the Uncompahgre Valley to the Gunnison River in the Black Canyon, and he found that the river in the canyon was higher than the valley. And that meant that if you ever could build a tunnel, the river water would run by gravity into the Uncompahgre Valley. But as I said, that appeared to be a pipe dream. In 1900, John Pelton, a wealthy landowner from the Uncompahgre Valley near Montrose, equipped a 5-man party to explore the Black Canyon and see what he called the lay of the land. Pelton took in with him 2 wooden boats. One was called the City of Montrose, the other the John C. Bell. They both weighed 300 pounds. They took supplies in for 30 days. And there they are at the start of the trip, the 5 men in one of the boats, and they're ready to leave from Cimarron to check it out. They lost one boat and half of their supplies early in the trip. The boat was smashed into kindling wood by the rocks and the rapids. And there you have a good idea. There's 3 of the guys sitting on top of a rock with roaring water down below. No way you can run that water, so they had to drag the boats around. They had enormous difficulty carrying those heavy boats around the water, and they couldn't run it because of the rapids and waterfalls. There you get a great idea of trying to hoist that 300-pound boat over the rocks, because in the canyon, no way you can run some of that water. At the end of 14 miles, the Pelton party came to the Falls of Sorrow. That's one they named, with perpendicular walls 200 feet high and no knowledge of what lay ahead. They were at the end of the line. The party was able to climb out of the North Rim, 50 miles from Montrose, on an old burro trail, out of water, and the trip a complete failure. The stage was now set for Abraham Lincoln Fellows. Fellows was born in 1864 in Maine. He graduated from Yale University with a civil engineering degree in 1887, and at that age of 23, was hired by an irrigation company in Mancos, deep in southwestern Colorado. By 1901, he was the resident hydrographer for the United States Geological Survey for all of southwestern Colorado. What now followed rivaled the John Wesley Powell expedition down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon in 1869. Abraham Fellows began a great story of adventure, water, and the role of the federal government in the West 123 years ago. A new federal agency called the Bureau of Reclamation had been established by the Newlands Act of 1901. If taxpayer money could be spent on river and harbor bills in the East, then by God, federal money could be spent to reclaim arid lands in the West. The arid Uncompahgre Valley seemed a perfect fit for that. It would be the first great Bureau of Reclamation project in history. Fellows was hired by the Bureau to go into the Black Canyon and survey for a possible diversion tunnel to get Gunnison River water into the Uncompahgre Valley. Fellows was aware of the Byron Bryant Railroad Survey of 1882, but not satisfied with it. Important questions remained to be answered, he thought. 1, what was the nature of the rock in the canyon? 2, was it possible to go through the canyon? And 3, if so, where would the tunnel site be? Abraham Lincoln Fellows advertised in the Montrose newspaper for an assistant to go with him through the canyon. It read, must be a good swimmer, athletic, good mountain climber, temperate, unmarried, able to obey orders, and have no one dependent upon him. The man who answered the ad and was chosen was the man the Fellows hoped would answer, and that was William Torrance of Montrose, who had been with the Pelton expedition the year before. And there you got a great picture. That's Abraham Lincoln Fellows on the right and 29-year-old William Torrance of Montrose on the left. Torrance was now 30 years old, and he knew part of the canyon well. He was asked by Fellows what kind of boats they would take into the canyon, and William Torrance replied, we're not taking any boats. Fellows was stunned, and he said to Torrance, what the hell do you mean we're not taking any boats? We're about to go through some of the most dangerous water in the world, and most of it we don't know about. I didn't think you had to be sane in the advertisement for you to apply. But William Torrance was right. He said, what we're going to do, a lot of that water is unrunnable. We are going to walk along one side of the Gunnison River, and when we get cliffed out, we are going to lay on air mattresses and dog paddle to the other side and walk there. Fellows then asked, and this will become obvious later on, what happens if we get cliffed out on both sides? And William Torrance said, we'll answer that question if and when we come by it. An old trapper and hunter of the Cimarron Montrose area, a man named Moccasin Bill, told Fellows that there were Indian trails down into the canyon, and they'd been about halfway down through. Fellows would soon find out that that was a lie. Captain James Klein, who had a ranch 3 miles up Cimarron Creek, said the same. Cimarron early was known as Klein's Ranch. In June of 1901, Fellows established a camp on top of Vernal Mesa and conducted 2 months of surveying. He said, I never lost an opportunity to study the canyon from the top and finding ways of getting down into it. Asa Dillon of Montrose would be used to bring supplies to 3 spots in the canyon, waiting at each one in turn until we should arrive, said Fellows, or until there was no longer any hope that we would ever arrive. And there you got a great shot of Asa Dillon in the canyon where they reconnoitered the first time. Today, if you go west of Gunnison, there's a beautiful rock formation on the left side of the road as you go, on the right side of the road, I should say, as you're heading for Montrose. And that beautiful rock formation is called the Dillon Pinnacles, and they're named for Asa Dillon. Fellows said later that without Dillon, the expedition would have failed. Before leaving to go into the canyon, Fellows took Torrance's advice. 2 air mattresses to float on, a rubber bag to put your instruments in, knives, 2 100-foot pieces of silk lifeline ropes, and a camera, along with food that would be carried in the rubber bag. They would drink river water. On August the 12th, 1901, Fellows and Torrance rode the Denver and Rio Grande train out of Montrose to Cimarron. When the conductor left them off there, a woman on the train remarked to the conductor, quote, I'm glad you put them 2 tramps off the train. The men obviously weren't going on a pleasure trip, They were going into the canyon and dressed accordingly. The two men photographed the start and then set out at 3 p.m. In August, the water in the canyon was warmer and lower, and they now headed into terra incognita. Only tales, legends, and bits and pieces of information existed. They headed downriver with heavy rubber bags on their backs. The walking was tough. Boulders with mountain lion dens, bear tracks, mountain sheep, beaver dens, and probably astonished eagles circling above, wondering what those two idiots were doing going into the Black Canyon. Once they started, there were to be no turning back and not much of an opportunity to climb out. They would be committed. Fellows and Torrance would cross the Gunnison River 76 times, going from one bank to another on top of air mattresses, and were under pressure from the constant roar of the river. They twice avoided danger from huge rocks coming down, and often walked on mountain sheep trails 300 feet above the water. Once Fellows fell 20 feet into gooseberry bushes, and luckily was not hurt. Now, when I say there were big rocks that came from the canyon walls down, there is William Torrance in the middle of one of them. Keep that in mind, because we're going to say a little more about that later on. On the third day, they passed the wreck of the John C. Bell boat of the Pelton expedition. On that day, they got to Trail Gulch, where they were met by Asa Dillon the first time. They asked Dillon for new shoes at the next stop. Those are worn out, and sent Film out with them. In case, said Fellows, we did not make it. In the canyon, the two men could not eat fish because a cyanide process in the stamp mills of Lake City on the Lake Fork had polluted the water and killed the fish. The men rested at Trail Gulch for 2 nights and a day, sleeping most of the time. And then on the 16th, the 5th day of the trip, headed out again. They soon saw the giant stairway and the painted wall on the side of the canyon walls, and on the 17th went beyond where anybody had ever ventured. Fellows and Torrance built giant bonfires out of huge piles of driftwood which lined the Gunnison River to show Asa Dillon that they were alive and they had passed that point. Fellows and Torrance now passed the Falls of Sorrow, where the Pelton party had come out. They saw the ropes and the supplies that had been left. Downstream, they came to the Narrows, with walls 2,000 feet high, and the width of the river only 44 feet, and no bank on either side to walk on. Now, there is a picture of myself. This is 1972 with a 35-pound caravel raft. I went down with my good friends Dave Nix and John Rovat, and you must touch the left wall. That's 100 yards. Water is very fast, and then you can see it disappear on the right. And if you don't get out on the left bank, you're going over a 25-foot waterfall, and you're probably not going to make it. So there's no bank on either side to walk on. And now, Fellows turned to Torrance, and he said, you said that we'll cross that bridge if and when we come to it, if there's no bank on either side to walk on. Now, there's a good picture, ladies and gentlemen, of the fast water through the Narrows, and that's taken from a picture from Mr. Fellows. And boy, I'll tell you what, they were very lucky to survive going through that. Walls 2,000 feet up and down, no bank on either side, and water roaring through the 25-foot waterfall at the end of it. When Rovat, Nix, and I went through in 72, I just told the guys, we got to touch the left wall at all times, and we did. Well, when Abraham Lincoln Fellows asked Torrance, what do we do now? Torrance, exact words, grabbed his air mattress and rubber bag and jumped into the Narrows with the cry, here goes nothing. He had no idea what was below. Tremendous mist of water, roaring water, in he goes. The ring on the walls of the Narrows show how high the water was through history. Now, Melinda, if we can go back to my photo, back, you see the ring on the wall on the right side, folks. That's like the ring on a bathtub. And that is how high the water was at high water for millions of years. and I got my hand in the air, so it's about 9 feet high. Now, we went through at 2,700 cubic feet. I wouldn't go through there at 28, but that ring on the wall shows that the water sometimes got to 9 and 10,000 cubic feet as it flowed through the Narrows. Torrance was now spit out over the rocks and landed in the calm pool of water below, dazed and bleeding, but alive. Fellows followed with the same result. Now, there you got a great picture of William Torrance viewing the rapids. So you can get a good idea now, folks. If you got a boat, there's no way you're running that kind of stuff. And now you're lucky to walk on one side or the other. The two men now met Asa Dillon just below the Narrows and got resupplied. That night, after drying out their clothes, after they did every night, they camped 300 feet above the water, with the river water roaring and the eagles eyeballing them. On the 18th, Fellows and Torrance hoped the worst was over, but it was just getting started. They now came to a quarter-mile section where huge rocks had fallen off the canyon walls, burying the Gunnison River 20 to 30 feet below. The two men swam in rivulets, banging against the rocks. It took them 6 hours to go 400 yards. It took us, in 1972, 6 hours to go 400 yards. We would have a log from one rock to another, and I had a rope around my waist, and you kind of walk the log, and that's how we did it, and it took a long time. At 2 o'clock that day on the 18th, they were hungry, sick, exhausted, and wet. And while hiking 40 feet above the river, they surprised 2 mountain sheep, which were sleeping, and startled them. One of the sheep fell 40 feet into the rocks, breaking its shoulder. And there you got a good look at Torrance with the sheep that was killed as it fell 40 feet, breaking its shoulders. Fellows and Torrance killed it and ate a hind quarter. Fellows saying in his diary that he hoped that the game and fish would look kindly upon him because the laws didn't allow for killing a mountain sheep at that time of the year. After this tough section, the two men hit the most beautiful part of the canyon, Torrance Falls, a series of waterfalls on the river, and named for William Torrance by Fellows. On the 19th, they were in heavy rain and met Asa Dillon for the third and final time at beautiful Red Rock Canyon. They were tempted to come out there because they believed they had found a tunnel site. Now, during their trip up to that point, they had run transit readings regularly in the canyon. And there you get a good shot of Fellows using his transit. They are looking for the tunnel site to divert water out of the river. However, they felt that in the 10 miles down below, they would hit a farmhouse and the trip would end. So on they went. But after 10 miles, no ranch house. They slept in the canyon, out of food, out of water. And the following day hit a burro trail and began to exit the canyon. On the way out, they came to a farmhouse with the door locked, but with 2 apple pies on the windowsill. They were able to open the window, and they ate the pies, and then left a note for the ranch wife, explaining their situation and telling her that they would be back to make amends. On August the 21st, the 10th day, they finally came out of the canyon and got to Delta, where they took the train to Montrose, arriving at 12:45. They were bruised, cut, exhausted, dehydrated, and each man had lost 15 pounds, but they had made it. 3 years later, the Bureau of Reclamation began building the Gunnison Tunnel that had been found. The site had been found by Fellows and Torrance in the canyon to divert Gunnison River water into the Uncompahgre Valley. From 1904 to 9, work went on from the east or river portal in the canyon, building the Gunnison Tunnel. Now there you get a good shot of the east portal. That's down in the river. The east portal of the Gunnison Tunnel, better known as River Portal, that's the powerhouse. They diverted the river water so they could start digging from the west end. The cost of the tunnel, and incidentally, on the west end of the tunnel, we had another place where they dug, and that was called Luani. and Luani, or the west portal of the tunnel. This is the east portal. The west portal is 8 miles from Montrose. Go ahead. And there is Luani. There are the tents where the workers lived. And that is 8 miles from Montrose. If you know about where to look, you might be able to see that, but most people don't. So workers are working from the river portal and the west portal, and they're going to meet in the middle. The cost of the tunnel was $10 million. 24 men died building it. Each portal had living quarters, a sawmill, a power plant, and many engineers. In one section of the tunnel, the men came to crumbling rock, where they said ancient sea creatures were. They saw fish vertebrae. There's a good shot of the men working in the tunnel. And you can see they got ore cars in there to get the rock out. And it was tough work. The tunnel, when they met in the middle, they were 11/100ths of an inch off. The tunnel was 30,852 feet long, or 6 miles long, and heavily timbered. And there you got the redwood timber. And you can see the track where the ore cars carried rocks in and out. The Gunnison Tunnel was the largest irrigation tunnel in the world and was the first big Bureau of Reclamation project in history, the Uncompahgre project. 600 miles of laterals, canals, and ditches were now built in the Uncompahgre Valley, a tremendous engineering achievement. Now, I've been all over that with the ditch rider, and sometimes the drops are so great that kayaks can drop off of them. So you got to know what you're doing in there, so the water continually kind of goes downhill. The Uncompahgre River now had enough water, and towns like Kelowna and Montrose and Olathe and Pea Green and Delta were saved. On September the 23rd, 1909, the President of the United States, William Howard Taft, came to Luani in the West Portal to throw the switch to start the water flowing. And there is the big fella, 300 pounds of him, William Howard Taft, throwing the switch that will start the water flowing into the Uncompahgre Valley. Abraham Lincoln Fellows said later that it had all been worth it. And he said, quote, "When I think of the hardships, of the moments where there seemed to be no light ahead, when it appeared that the present moment was the last, I think too now of the prosperous homes in the Uncompahgre Valley, of the many happy homes, the beautiful orchards, the schoolhouses filled with children, and I am content knowing that out of trial cometh." He was a religious man. And there is the celebration on September 23rd, 1909 in Montrose, celebrating the opening of the Gunnison Tunnel. Abraham Fellows died in 1942 at the age of 78. Now there's a great picture, and I've been through there twice in the Gunnison Tunnel. This one is illegally with the ditch rider. Later on, they cemented the Gunnison Tunnel, the 6 miles of it. And you can go through there to just check for things in about November when there's no irrigation. There is a little water on the bottom, but you can drive a car through. And if you got claustrophobia, you probably don't want to be in there. Fellows died in 1942 at the age of 78. Torrance died in 1951. Fellows had a long career as an engineer, but he said later that the highlight of his life was the 10 days in the bowels of the earth, on the edge of a knife in the Black Canyon during the 10 days in 1901. And he would never again be able to duplicate those days of glory. Torrance lived in the Uncompahgre Valley as a farmer until his death in 1951, taking advantage of the water through the tunnel that he had helped bring to the Uncompahgre Valley. Today, the Taylor Reservoir, built from 1935 to 37 by the Bureau of Reclamation, holds 106,200 acre-feet of water that is owned by the Uncompahgre Water Users Association. When they need that water, they can call for it, and it comes to them via the Taylor River, the Gunnison River, and the Gunnison Tunnel. Now, 1975, right after Dick Lamb had been elected governor, we had a five-man party that took him through the Black Canyon. He always wanted to go. My good friend Jim Hanks is on the left filming it. Gordon Zapp, the ex-football coach, is in the back. Governor Lamb's in the middle. and a girl I was dating at the time named Mariana is in the front. Governor Lamb wowed us a little bit during the trip with his expertise as a kayaker. But when we came to a spot called Leapfrog, foaming water, 400 yards long, his exact words to me were, Dwayne, give me the camera. I'll walk ahead and take a picture of you guys. And then we realized that maybe Governor Lamb wasn't as good with the kayak as he said he was. The Black Canyon became a national monument in 1932 and a national park, one of 4 in the state, with Rocky Mountain National Park, the Great Sand Dunes, and Mesa Verde in 1999. 200,000 people visit every year, and the park has visitor centers on both the north and the south rim. The Black Canyon is famous for having some of the greatest mountain climbs in the nation, including the Painted Wall and the North and South Chasm. The early climbs on the canyon walls were pioneered by the great climber from Boulder, Leighton Core, in the 1960s. After Core, other great climbers ascended the wall, including the giant stairway, the Painted Wall, and the 2 chasms. One of them was a good friend of mine named Jimmy Newberry, who now runs the post office and Newberry store at Cimarron. In 1980, he and 4 friends pioneered a new route up a dangerous section of the canyon called Hallucinogen, which had nothing to do with drugs. It was called Hallucinogen because you never quite knew where you were going to go. And kind of an interesting story. A guy from one of the Denver radio stations got word what these guys were doing. So he camps out down below, and these guys are on the wall for 8 days. And one day it snowed, and Jimmy told me they had a transistor radio and they were listening to the reports. And the guy at the radio station said they're going to be tough on the wall tonight. And they all laughed. There were 4 other guys with Jimmy, and they had no trouble, but they were on the walls for 8 days on hallucinogen. One of the most interesting men of the Black Canyon was a guy by the name of Robert Nelson, the hermit of the Black Canyon. Nelson was born in Stockholm, Sweden in 1859. He came to the U.S. as a young man in 1880, worked in Omaha for a few years, and then came to Denver and Fairplay, and he worked on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Nelson wound up working on the Denver Rio Grande, living in Saponaro, and working in the Black Canyon. In 1897, he declared, and I quote, "There is too much trouble in the world," unquote. And he quit the railroad and began to live in the canyon full time. He picked out a spot 1 mile below the Curricanti Needle in Chipeta Falls. At that spot was an acre of good level soil surrounded by pine trees. And there, for 47 years, Robert Nelson lived. He fished, he raised hogs and chickens, raised vegetables, berries, and had apple trees. He sold his produce, riding the train to Cimarron, and then later, when only 1 freight train ran once a week, he often walked to the railroad town at Saponaro. Nelson had a cabin, an outhouse, and a chicken coop in the canyon, and to help local farmers nearby get their potatoes to market, hand-built a steep wagon road from the Black Mesa Road up above down to his cabin, and the railroad 1,800 feet vertical feet down. The last 200 feet were too steep for a road, so Nelson devised a way by use of block and tackle to lower the wagon to the canyon floor. Then the potatoes could be loaded onto the train. Denver and Rio Grande men tossed newspapers and magazines off the train for Nelson to read, and they checked on the hermit often. In 1936, railroad men tried to get a government pension for him, but he wouldn't sign the papers saying that he didn't want charity. In 1944, after 47 years living alone in the canyon, Robert Nelson, at age 85, contacted pneumonia and was taken to the Gunnison Hospital, where he died on April the 4th. He is buried in an unmarked grave in the Gunnison Cemetery. Today, the Hermit Rest Trail into the canyon, which drops 1,800 feet from the Black Mesa Road, is named for the famed hermit of the Black Canyon. Another interesting figure of the canyon was the, quote, Black Canyon nude of the 1950s. 2 sisters from Montrose were first to spot the nude man. They said, quote, attired only in canvas sneakers and a pair of binoculars around his neck. The Montrose paper declared, quote, "The nude rushes back into the canyon every summer like tourists and mosquitoes." The Montrose sheriff investigated and said that he thought the man was interested in good fishing, and then, quote, "he strips off and goes back to nature." The Denver Post referred to him as the Cimarron nude and the Black Canyon nude. The two girls who saw him, quote, said he had a real red suntan. Today, the waters of the Gunnison River and the Black Canyon have been harnessed by 3 dams. Blue Mesa, built in 1965, backing up 946,000 acre-feet of water, and the Mora Point and Crystal dams, built in the 1970s. There you get a great shot of the Crystal Dam, backing up about 55,000 acre-feet of water. And we go to the next one. Very rarely does it spill, but this time it is spilling in 1972 at high water. However, through the mists of time, we can still see the snorting engines of the Rio Grande carefully making their way along the roaring waters of the Gunnison River. Fellows and torrents on the edge of a knife in the bowels of the canyon. Leighton Core and Jim Newberry suspended on a 2,700-foot vertical wall. Rainbow and brown trout leaping into the air during the willowfly hatch in the spring. Eagles circling, bears, mountain lions, and coyotes prowling, and the incredible beauty of one of the world's great wonders, the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Now, before we leave this, I'm going to hold off on Melinda a little bit. I always thought that we were the first ones to go all the way through the Black Canyon in 1972, and we did it again in 1973. But I found out that in 1934, Harvey Barsh of Montrose and Jack Gorsuch of Cedar Ridge went through. They went all the way through. An interesting story. Jack Gorsuch's father, and I'm quoting now, called the local sheriff and asked him to apprehend Jack. Turn on the next photo, Melinda. There is Harvey Barsh and Jack Gorsuch. Asked the sheriff to apprehend Jack. The officer asked on what grounds. And Jack Gorsuch's father said, and I'm quoting, "Jack was being a stupid son of a bitch and going to kill himself going down that Black Canyon." But the sheriff reminded Wallace that Jack was by no means breaking the law. Now, Jack Gorsuch was Dave Gorsuch. Some of you folks remember him, the great Olympic skier. That was his father. And these two guys went through in 5 days in 1934. You can see their ropes, you can see their can of water, and I always wish I could have known them. So we weren't number 1, we were number 2. That takes care of the Black Canyon talk. And now we are ready for the 3 trivia questions for a book called Around the Gunnison Country. First come, first serve, and Melinda will tell you how to answer.
Okay, so you need to be in the chat box and make sure, maybe we'll pause briefly between each one so that allows them time to enter it. And then whoever has all 3 correct, not 1 or 2, all 3 will be the winner.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. What is the name of the man who supplied Fellows and Torrents in the canyon? Number 2, what body of water do the Uncompahgre water users own and get their water from to irrigate the Uncompahgre Valley? And number 3, within 2 miles either way, what is the length of the Black Canyon?
So you need to have all 3 in your response.
So here we go, we'll wait.
Dylan, Gunnison, 6 miles. No?
No,
Barrows, Taylor Reservoir, 55 miles.
no, we don't have any answer yet. We got number 1, who supplied the 2 men in the canyon. Number 2, where does the water come from that goes into the Uncompahgre Valley? And number 3, within 55 miles. There we go. Well, Christy almost got it. We got Dylan, Taylor Reservoir, and 55 miles. We got it. Greg, we need your name and address. We'll wait for that. The answers: Asa Dillon, Taylor Reservoir, and 55 miles.
All right, Greg Potter, you are the winner. If you want to send you can actually put it in the chat right now and we will make sure that you get the book, or we can contact via email after today's podcast.
Folks, are there any questions or comments on the Black Canyon? It's great to have everybody aboard. Keith says, I was on jury duty with Dick Lamb in the late 80s. We had a lot of time to kill, and I mentioned that I'd grown up in Crested Butte. He related the story about his trip through the Black Canyon, an adventure he would never forget. Great story. Yeah, it's one I would never forget either. By whom and when was it officially named the Black Canyon? Pete, there is no known answer to that, except that after it was called the Grand Canyon by the Hayden Survey and John Gunnison, sometime after 1874. But I don't have any idea who named it Black. But they named it Black because of what I said. It was narrow, it was black mostly, except when the sun was up right above it at noon. Any other questions or comments, folks? Yeah, Marianne Reagan, very much. Thank you. And we got Greg's.
Greg, awesome.
We got Greg's address. Adelaide McCann, how long did it take you to go through the canyon? And where can you go to see Chipeta Falls? Well, it took us about 4.5 days to go through. And where can you go see Chipeta Falls? If the water is low and you go in at Pine Creek and you walk down 256 steps, and you can walk along the river. Now the water's got to be low, and then you can see Chipeta Falls and the Kirikana Needle. Or if you go to Pioneer Point on the north, on the Black Mesa Road, that's on the north rim. And you walk down a few steps, you can see the Kirikana Needle, and Chipeta Falls is on this side, so you can't see the falls, but it's right across. Thank you for another great evening. Thank you, Catherine Keller, for being on.
Yeah, come and say hi, Catherine, when you visit.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions on the Black Canyon, folks? I appreciate everybody being on. We had a great group. Yeah, Pete Dunda, thank you very much. Mike, how did the 1922 Colorado River Compact affect the diversion out of the Black Canyon? Was the diversion controversial? The River Compact had no impact on that because the Uncompahgre water users already owned the water. Their water rights go back to, obviously, to 1901, 1902. So, Mike, I'll get in touch with you tomorrow and we'll get together. Keith Fulmer, yeah, thank you very much for the kind comments, Keith.
All right, what's next week?
Next week, ladies and gentlemen, Gunnison, Lake City, and Monarch.
Ooh.
3 towns that we don't often talk about too much. And I think you'll all be interested, and we got a great photo collection I think that everybody will find very riveting. Yeah, the Bentleys, yeah, Dick Lamb's dog would come to my house and they would send a driver to get the dog from Wilma Fisher. That's interesting, Wilma. Yeah, Dick and Dottie Lamb both have passed away. I always thought Dick was a great governor. And then Buzz Bentley, thanks, folks. Fascinating as usual. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you, everybody. And for Melinda, Dwayne Vandenbush, over and out. And we'll see everybody again next Tuesday for Gunnison, Lake City, and Monarch. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.